Welcome to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and today my guest is Joshua Jacobs. He's a close personal friend of mine. I've known Josh for coming on 20 years now. Josh was the best man in my wedding. I was in Josh's wedding. Josh was there when my kids were born. We've been through thick and thin and deployments and some hard times and definitely some vulnerable moments. And we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna do everything in our soul that is uncomfortable in our nature from the organization we come from. Josh is a Wisconsin kid, so he might talk about the Packers a little bit or Aaron Rodgers and maybe the loss of him this year and the team, but we'll see. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Josh, who's retiring next year, was also just accepted into Emory University's executive MBA program, which is no small feat. And we know he's going to go up there and represent himself, the family, the organization very well. And we're just excited as heck for you and I'm looking forward to you blazing a trail a little bit. So I see if that's something I actually want to do or not. All right. So I know if Josh can do it, I can probably do it. That's kind of that's my litmus for all my life. So I'll pass it off to Josh, let him introduce himself, and then we'll get into the conversation.
All right. As you stated, Josh Jacobs. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, grew up in Oostburg, Wisconsin, a little small Dutch Norwegian community just north of Milwaukee. From there, after high school, I got into the trades. I was working in the trades until 9/11 happened. And after 9/11 happened, I decided, hey, I need to go do something I always wanted to do after watching Rambo First Blood, and that was join the United States Army.
Who didn't?
Yeah, exactly. And the big question at that point was, do I want to go to SF or be a Ranger? And then once I found out about the two organizations, watched a video on it, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And that was join the 75th Ranger Regiment and go to Savannah, Georgia, which my recruiter laughed at me when I said that. Anyway, fast forward, went through, joined the Army, went through basic training, AIT, got through airborne school, and then went to RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program. Got through that and finally made it to the 75th Ranger Regiment, lucked out, ended up in 175 with Yuma Barnett here in ACO 175. From there, we spent years conducting thousands of highly critical special operations raids against some of the most well-known terrorists in the world, some of the most infamous people. Throughout that time, we went through a lot of situations which we were put into states of vulnerability and ended up putting ourselves in situations that we might not otherwise want to be in. From there, I continued on through my service as an operational service member with Yuma and other folks as we parted our ways. Continued down that line with 175 and then eventually ended up back at the 75th Ranger Regiment working in acquisitions, new equipment development, and capability gap solutions. As I was doing that and heading towards retirement, I completed my bachelor's degree at UC Charleston. And then applied and was accepted.
Go Eagles!
Go Eagles! Heck yeah! Into Emory's executive MBA program, which is a true honor. When I got the phone call from General Keane and Sarah over there at Emory, I told him it was like being just getting the phone call that I just got selected in the first round of the NFL draft. That's how I felt. That's awesome. And so. Without, I'd like to give credit where credit is due. I'd like to thank my beautiful wife, Sydney, and my three precious children, one on the way, about to be 4 here in October, hopefully on the 30th, which is my birthday. But thank them for all their support and guidance throughout the years and putting up with me and carrying me through those situations and processes.
You are a smart man. By thinking the wife right up front, so you don't get that. You don't forget that. That's a quick snapshot at a 20-year career that has been amazing. We've been around, served with, been in the same position, same battalions, seen each other's whole careers. You and I have, except for that first year when I was there and you weren't. And I remember when I was I tab spec 4 when you got there?
You were a tab. About to pin on E5.
Yeah, and back then tab was a different world back then in the 75th. Some for better, some for worse. But that's the era we grew up in. But I knew immediately when this big Pollock, loud, boisterous voice came into the first platoon hallways at 175. I was like, I like this guy. There's something about him. And I knew I was in a line squad at the time, and I knew just by looking at him, he was going to have to go to weapon squad, right? He's a giant, right? They put the giants down there to carry all the heavy stuff. And I just kind of grew, I don't know, a friend and mentor. I think kind of immediately just kind of drew me to Josh from the start, and we served for quite a while in that platoon together, and a few deployments in the Cantiwa Valley deployment, and some very memorable deployments that some of you out there probably know what I'm talking about and been through some very trying situations. But we also had that platoon had some of the best leaders still that are still in the Army that are doing great things that you don't see that a lot in the platoons that are out there. But you can look around now and see guys from that platoon and other organizations crushing it, outside in the industry crushing it. We were very lucky to be in that platoon where we were. What do you think?
Absolutely. We had so the guys that we had a privilege of serving with and serving for, they are, like Yuma said, throughout special operations as key senior leaders in multiple organizations, and now working in industry and or in in MBA programs, which a couple of them are currently, and that's kind of what set the tone for me. You've got all these other Rangers out there setting the standards for others to follow, and that's our brethren that we served with. And you see these guys getting out there, and you see them getting jobs at Fortune 500 companies, taking on positions as command sergeant majors within the Army, or getting into an MBA program, and you look and you say, I can do that.
Yeah,
I can accomplish that myself. Why should I be any different than them? And it's like Yuma said, I'm by far the dumbest of the two of us in this room today. So when Yuma says if I can make it through, he can make it through, that's 100% true. If I can get through an MBA program, then anybody can do it, and surely Yuma, because he's like he said, he's been one of my mentors throughout.
Yeah, on that word mentorship, we'll discuss a little bit. I think the NCO core, the NCO culture, we don't value mentorship enough, right? The officers really do it because they kind of come up through mentorship, and when they're in college, whether they're in an ROTC program or West Point or whatever, they kind of have a mentor relationship at some point. They're much more transactional in our organization, at least. So people mentor them and guide them back to the regiment from the Army. And I didn't realize until recently, the last 5 years, how important mentorship is, and relationships, and how that can help you not only where you're at, but where you want to go as well. And have you found some value in most recent times, or when did you start realizing mentorship was important?
So I don't think I realized I always knew mentorship, the word and the definition, but never really understood what it was. It was already happening.
Absolutely.
From the moment I got in the Army, it was happening.
Yeah.
When I met you became a mentor to me and mentored me through my entire career, not just even when we were separated and in other units. You were in 375, I was in 175. I was always using you as a sounding board and continuing to go back to you for advice and guidance as we went through the process of continuing down our leadership paths. But I think you're 100% right. The NCO Corps does not understand or value the word mentorship as it should. When you see officers, so they kind of, it's something they carry on from college where they're assigned a mentor that essentially carries them through their bachelor's, their master's, whatever degree completion program they went through. And they have those mentors there. And then when they get to the unit in a military unit or to a company outside of college, they're usually assigned another mentor. So that kind of continues that process. For us, we come in and it's like the platoon is your family, and that family, there's a ton of mentors. They're all like your older brothers or father figures, and they're mentoring you through the entire process, and you don't really understand the key to the word mentor, and we don't carry that process through as well as we should. So you don't establish that contact and then keep that contact, and there's no formal structure for how the mentorship process works along the NCO channels.
I think that's the best way to put it. It's happening the whole time. It's just not really defined that it's happening. And if we can start to define it a little bit better, it'll get better. Just like anything, the more you refine it, you get a better product. And I think the NCO, we can refine that mentorship better to help retain people that need to retain, who are looking for purpose and wanting to get out of the Army, or people when they get out, through that mentorship, it's going to help them be successful. And I hope in the future, through some of the stuff the regiment's doing and that we're just doing as people, developing as people, that we kind of develop that more mentorship role in the NCO side of the channels.
Absolutely. Codify it, establish a process for it, and then follow through.
Yeah. So now we've got through some of the initial stuff. Now we'll get down to the vulnerability stuff. We got a little warm up in here and we'll get into it. So before we talk about vulnerability, I think it's important to define it. So vulnerability can mean a lot of things. That one thing it definitely doesn't mean, in my view, it doesn't mean weakness. It's not weakness being vulnerable. I speak often about vulnerability. Some of the best times of our lives when we're most vulnerable. When we're sitting there watching our kids be born, right? We're standing at the altar waiting for our spouse to walk down the aisle. When you're giving your first big jump master pitch, I mean, you feel pretty vulnerable up on that platform about to pitch. But when you're done, you feel the feeling that comes from it. So vulnerability is not weakness. I just wonder what vulnerability means to you.
Yeah, I guess for vulnerability, there's so many different ways to describe it. And in the beginning of our careers, and I think I can speak for both of us on this one, we didn't really have much in the way of an environment that was empathetic or provided any type of emotional intelligence. There was none of that. That didn't exist. All right. So I would say for the first 7-8 years of my life in the 75th Ranger Regiment, with what I would like to call my second family, there was no empathy. There was no process for sharing feelings, having feelings. You were steely-eyed killer, as we used to call it back in the day. And you were expected to be that alpha in the room at all times when you're in a leadership position. And that was the overall mantra of, I would say, special operations as a whole. And so as we continue to learn and grow, and we continue to develop as human beings and grow in both our leadership capacity and capability and our understanding of individuals, we gain this bit of emotional intelligence and empathy. And again, it's kind of like for the NCOs, it's like the mentorship process. You don't really talk about it. There's no direct correlation, at least as we were growing up, to where there's a process and somebody explains to you what empathy and emotional intelligence are. That didn't happen until later on in our careers. We were doing some leader professional development, and then as I began to take college classes and go down that road of what is empathy, what is emotional intelligence, what do those things mean, why are they important, how do they build a person other than just building them through pain and repetition of military training. How do we build them emotionally? How do we create empathy within the individual so that they can better understand the people within their formation, so that they can understand where those people are coming from, and be able to take that understanding and convert that into a better leadership process to their subordinates.
Yeah. We didn't have a good definition of it when you were there. I think back when we were growing up, vulnerability and empathy and all that was weakness. Like it was reviewed as weakness, right? But just because you're empathetic and expose vulnerability and are open with your guys and talk about emotional intelligence doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable. Doesn't mean there's not a standard. It probably means there's probably a higher standard because you're more open and honest with one another and more transparent. So just reframing it and ended up, and you hit the nail on the head, like the emotional intelligence. Understanding yourself is the key to everything in my view. Yep. And as we think about that and vulnerability, so you're on your second marriage.
I am,
right?
Yeah,
so
two-time offender.
Two-time offender, very good. So I know you got. I just want to speak about it a little bit because it's not unique to the service, right? There's a lot of people end up in a broken home. I'm from a broken home. I think were your parents divorced?
They were.
Yeah. So there's some challenges there. I was 5 years old when my parents divorced. I had to go through a lot of transition and stuff. Not only that, I couldn't imagine though if my dad was deploying constantly, and there can't be. Not only are you divorced and you're going through that, but now you're deploying, and you came to Fort Benning, I think, for a time during that, and kind of But I mean, Fort Benning, you're still 4 hours away from the kids that were down in Savannah. What was that? What was that like for you? How did you manage that? What got you through it? What got your kids through it? Or are you still getting through it?
So I think it's a process. I think I don't think you're ever through that process until they reach adulthood and they're off on their own, and you've hopefully given them the tools to succeed in what they need. And so for me, I came out of a deployment. There were some issues with infidelity within the marriage. There were some issues with our marriage as a whole, which any relationship, if it dissolves, it's not one person's fault. It's always you gotta own your own faults, and you gotta own your own issues and shortcomings. And part of that was me leading a life in the 75th Ranger Regiment and being constantly deployed and constantly away. And I can understand where that would wear on a human being. I don't think we're as open as honest. Again, I didn't have the emotional intelligence and empathy that maybe I would have liked to have had at that time to better understand other people, to better understand my wife at the time,
Right.
to better understand the needs of my children. So as I went through that process, that was a steep learning curve for me. At that point, I was coming to the end of my platoon sergeant time. And I was leaving 1st Ranger Battalion for the first time to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So not only was I getting divorced, but I was also getting divorced essentially from my Ranger Battalion,
Yeah.
and I was going to the regimental headquarters, which over to Regimental Special Troops Battalion to lead our Assessment Selection Program 1, and that was a whole new process in and of itself. So not only, it was going to RASP 1 to kind of take a knee to take over the program, which
absolutely.
Taking a knee for the regiment is going from leading 30 to 40 people to leading about 1,000.
Right.
So I went from 30 to 40 people that I was responsible for on any given day to 1,000 plus an 18-man crew of instructors. They were expected to implement this very strict assessment selection process, and thank God the process is in place and everything is documented, and there's a well established process for getting these guys through and for training the instructors. And some of that was done by my counterpart before me, and some of that was continued to be developed through my time there. But as I'm learning how to transition and become a leader of an assessment selection program to really evaluate human beings, and again, in that program is where I learned a lot of my emotional intelligence and empathy. So I went into this kind of dark place coming out of my marriage, transitioning, splitting the family apart, and the hardest part is never separating from a spouse. Adults can cope with that separation, and learn to overcome that and move on. It's the children. You're separated from your kids. I went from seeing my kids every day that I was home to seeing them 2 days out of every 14 days. Yeah. And that goes down a whole nother road that we could do another podcast on of how imbalanced the system is for males and females when families separate, and how the male is held accountable for everything as far as finances. And then also, I'm expected to pay the brunt of the finances, but then also I only get to see my kids 2 days every 14 days. How does that balance out? And so that's a whole nother story. But so I'm going through that process in my mind. I'm going through that struggle of now I've deployed for going on 7-8 years. I've been away from my kids through those deployments, and now I'm being separated again from them, but not by choice, essentially. And now I'm going to have a very limited amount of time to be able to spend with them and affect their growth and development as human beings. Yeah. And so at the same time I'm going through that, I am all in on leading 1,000 kids through this assessment selection program, 18 instructors, putting the right foot forward, and
to not downplay this selection is the most important thing of the regiment, because who we bring in is what keeps us going. So no, I mean, like you said, not really taking a knee at that moment. Yeah,
I was taking a knee, leading the program of our future of the 75th Ranger Regiment, and thankfully, like I said, the guy that was there before me, Phil Paquette, was phenomenal and really set the tone for me. As I took over the program and went in, and there were some emotional days there where I had to just shut the office door and take a knee in my office and just let my feelings out to myself, because there was nobody else. Again, you didn't want to show any signs of weakness, because the moment you do that, then within our organization, within our framework of special operations, it's the alpha male mentality. Yeah. It's that that leader that is beyond reproach, that is not affected by anything, that is always standing steady, ready to defend the gates. So as I work through that process, learning how to lead an assessment selection program, and learning how to balance the development of my children in the minute amount of time that I would have with them. I continued to grow, and it goes back to emotional intelligence and empathy, and I grew those two things exponentially during that time. When you're talking about the assessment selection program, it's you are basically the final deciding point for whether or not these kids are going to succeed and fail in the program, and what path their career will take from there.
Let's bring up the parallel there. If you're bringing the kids in where they're going to succeed or fail, but you also have two kids at home that are in kind of the same process, and you're removed from it. So what a weird paradigm to be in.
And so that's kind of the struggle that I had. So that's a phenomenal point, and kind of where I was going with this whole thing is that, now I'm trying to do this with other people's kids, but I can't even do it with my own kids.
Wow.
And then so I went through a whole period of time of a struggle of how do I best in that small amount of time grow and develop my children and my own children. And then, I was going in like I learned, we learned through pain and repetition. My old man was the same way growing up. He was a phenomenal father, but we learned through pain and repetition, and that's how we did things. And I was fortunate enough to have, very loving, caring family. There were hugs. My parents, my brothers, we all hug each other. We tell each other we love each other. Yeah. So that was always there, and that was a strong point. So I had that kind of base of emotional intelligence and empathy growing up. But it was also under the premise of pain and repetition. You can learn how to do things, and as we all do, we learn through failure.
Absolutely.
How do we learn how to walk or ride a bike? We fail multiple times before that ever actually happens, and we learn what not to do, and then we succeed. And life is much the same way, both in our careers in the 75th Ranger Regiment and growing up, and growing these and developing these children. And for me, So I took the kind of hard-lined approach of at first of pain and repetition. So we're going to learn. I'm going to be the dad. We're going to take the tough stance. But what I learned is that I had such a minute amount of time with them that I could not utilize that approach. And one of the books that really spoke to me was Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he goes through a paradigm shift that he had in there with his own kid.
Absolutely.
And how he was working through this process of how to best relate to them, and instead of forcing your child to do what you want them to do, figure out what they want to do, and then cultivate that, build it, and build a bond with your kids beyond anything else. And that's something that I really learned from that book, from my experience in both RASP and in that time with my kids that I had. And as I continued to develop the process, so now we're at a point where we're doing a lot of writing goals, identifying strengths and weaknesses with the kids. Hey, what are the things you want to accomplish in your life? And when you're a child, it's not going to be these huge monumental things. They're not going to know exactly what they want to do. Jack, for example, is an LSU fan, so he wants to go to LSU.
That's got to be rough on you.
So and that's fine. Obviously I'm a Big Ten guy, Wisconsin, go Badgers.
But he's a football fan.
So cultivate it, grow it.
Common ground.
I wasn't always a Packers first guy. I was a Packers fan and a Chiefs fan and a Raiders fan back in the day.
Yep.
So you kind of learn and grow through life, and you come back to your roots most of the time, and everyone, as long as they're finding something that they love, and you're nurturing that, that is really going to build them as a human being and create a strong bond with you as a parent and them as a child.
I think the key, what we want, I think both of us want, is we just want our kids to do better than we did.
Yep.
Right? It's the same as if any Ranger. Now I don't care. I want you to be better than me. I want you to get the degree in the EMBA and be the battalion sergeant major that I'm not. I hope that for you. I wish that for you. I wish the same things for our kids. And I will say, Kate and I speak about it often when you're around our kids and you have Jack and Jenna over here and Reagan over here. Often when you leave, Kate will just say, Josh is such a good dad. And you're a great dad, and it's a tough situation because I know we've both been that kid in that scenario, and you've done a phenomenal job. I look up to you as a father, and I know it's probably been hard, but you've done better than most people could ever have done in that situation, right? So, great job there. Keep trucking on, and then you're crazy. You're good. Be 41 this year. 41, and I know if you heard him, he said there's one on the way. Right? Yep. You got a kid on the way. So,
one in the hopper.
Good luck to you. No better way to keep you young than to have infants running around when you're in your mid 40s, right?
I would have 10 or 12 if I could.
Yeah, I'm sure Sydney's excited about the EMBA program aligning with like when the kids do.
Oh, she can't wait. Yeah, she's super excited. Having helped me through the entire condensing of a bachelor's degree into about a year period and getting through all of that. Well, still working, doing my job at the 75th, balancing life and kids, and completing a degree within a 1-year period of time. And then now, hey, guess what? 18 more months we're signing up for here. She's extremely, extremely supportive and proud of what I've been able to accomplish. But again, I haven't been able to accomplish any of that without her.
Right.
She's been the block of granite that holds me in place and is my base. Every time I get a blow from one thing or another, she's my sounding board. She's the person that I go to. She is she's my life coach, essentially.
Yeah.
That's the best way to explain it. She's my best friend, love of my life, and my life coach.
That's awesome. So I know Sydney's a very important person in your life. She definitely keeps you honest, keeps you real, keeps you grounded, because you tend to come off. If you're on time, it's because of Sydney. It's not because you're there on time, right?
As I said this weekend, I'm more of an art than a science.
That's a very good way to put Josh Jacobs in there. But we'll stay on the uncomfortable side, the vulnerability side, and something that we don't talk about a lot is we talk about a lot of the good times we've had in the service and a lot of the missions and stuff. We'll talk about some of the bad, but there's usually some sort of liquid catalyst to that when we get into those situations. And the only thing we got here is some coffee. But you've been part of the war, since the beginning. What were your hardest days in uniform, and what it mean to you? How'd you get through it? How do you still reflect on it?
So I think so one of probably the first hardest day that I ever had in uniform, besides the direct combat shared experiences with other members within the platoon, squads, and teams, is when I was serving as a platoon sergeant, and this would have been around the 10-11 time frame. And my father passed away while I was in duty as a platoon sergeant over there, and that really impacted me because it was kind of a turning point in my military career in my life. I lost this mentor, this figure, this legend within my own life, and I had a realization of all this time that I had missed with my family, and that was one of the hardest things to me, is that I just spent the last 7-8 years away from him by choice, not being there to be able to continue to cultivate that relationship and grow and show my appreciation for him, and how thankful I was and how much love and respect I had for him, and missing that time with him and the rest of my family, kind of brought me around to say, hey, I've missed out on this huge chunk of time with the rest of my family. And like I said, we're very loving, giving, caring family. And that really hit me. And it caused me to kind of rethink my career and my path.
Yeah.
And it really, at that point, I knew that I was going to do 20 years, especially, with some of the issues I was having in my marriage at that time. I knew I was going to do 20 years, all the time I was missing with my own kids. And then at the end of that 20 years, I was going to be on my way out of the military service so I could refocus and put time back into my family. And that was when you talk about your life goals and how you set your goals, that it was a paradigm shift from me wanting to be a battalion CSM, maybe the regimental CSM one day, and competing for other positions beyond that. And so that kind of shifted my focus back to, hey, I need to be down and in on my own family, even with the lack of time. If I already have a lack of time as I continue forward in life and start to go through that divorce process, if I already have the shrinking amount of time that I'm going to spend with my kids and the rest of my extended family, now I need to reassess that situation, reevaluate it, and change my goals, my future goals.
Yeah.
And that'll lead to other things that we'll probably talk about later. But that was the first really life-changing experience. And it wasn't, maybe you were thinking something down and in with combat, but that one hit me harder than anything else. In our culture, I know, we all choose to go to war. We choose to do that thing. It's like a Viking culture, whether or not we agree or disagree with the politics of the matter, we want to go over there and hunt and destroy the enemies of our country. And that's what we signed up to do, to protect the freedoms that we have been given, and the freedoms of the rest of the world, what they should have.
Yeah, you're right. So it's funny when I talk to people or the war, that's easy.
Yeah.
It's everything out external from it. That really weighs on you, right? Aside from the fringe you lose, but like, it's really hard to say that people won't understand it, but killing people is easy. Like,
it is.
It's just what it is. But it's missing when your dad passed away, missing the ballet recital, missing the birth of your kids with so many people that I know. That's the stuff that really weighs on you. That's the hardest.
That's right.
And a lot of times the only thing you reflect on those when you're by yourself. You don't share it with anybody. You just do it by yourself, and it's time. The older you get, you start to realize that time's your most valuable asset, and there's never going to be any more of it. And we've spent a lot of time away, and those are the moments that really weigh heavy on us.
Well, like you said, the killing is easy, and that's because we know why we're doing it. We know who we're going after, and these people have earned the right to die. We always used to say they got about 30 seconds to a minute when they hear those helicopter blades to decide whether they want to live or die.
Yep.
And then from there we'll take the rest into our hands.
Yeah.
And that's really it. We're over there, and when Yuma says that the killing's easy, it's easy because we know what we're there for, we know why we're there, and we know that the people that we're going to destroy are bad human beings that deserve it, that need it, that have earned it.
Absolutely. So let's switch gears a little bit, right? So you're coming up on the end of your career, you retire next year as well as I do. What was your decision to apply to Emory, get the MBA, everything you've done in your career? What do you hope to get from that? What's it going to bring for you? I mean, it's another 2 years. It's going to be challenging, difficult. I think we're just kind of gluttons for punishment. We really are. It's just in our nature. That's what we do. But what was your thought process behind all that?
Well, so it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. When I had that paradigm shift when my father passed away, and I knew that I wasn't going to be a full career beyond 20 years military man, and that I wanted to get more time with the family. The question is, how do you get to that point? So I set the goals. Here's what I want to accomplish. Here's how much time I want to spend per day with my family. So I set myself on a glide path of coming out of the financial wreck that a divorce is, resetting my finances and setting myself up in a place where now my current wife, then my future wife, Sydney, we're going to be in a place where we could grow and develop a family, put ourselves in a financial position to where we wouldn't have to worry about working, that we would be able to spend, or maybe working, like we did, where it was, 60, 80, 100 hours a week, sometimes gone for months at a time, to put myself in a position where I could, work anywhere from 20 to 30 to 40 hours a week and still be at home with the family and travel less and have more time. And so how do we get to that point? Well, we get to that point through process of education and certification. As we all know, the world as we know it, you have life experience, but we have job experience as we came through the 75th, but how do we build our resume out to get to a point where we can be in a position where we can leverage our knowledge, we can help other people, but we're spending less time doing it. All right, so tons of capacity, tons of ability to affect and develop and grow a person, people, or companies, but also doing that in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So if I can do in 4 hours what the average 4 or 6 hours what the average person can do in 8 hours, which we all know that anybody who's been in our organizations, you can accomplish that feat, the average person. We can accomplish in a few hours what the average person can accomplish in an 8-hour day. So if I can get to that point and I can get all the proper certifications leading up to that, then I can get myself in a position to where I'll be able to influence and manage instead of working. I want to be the type B, the business owner or entrepreneur, instead of the E, the employee. If you look at the 4 quadrants, and going back to that, how do we get to success? Well, we get to success through setting that glide path. That glide path for me was acquiring my bachelor's degree, and then getting my master's degree and setting myself up. And really the master's degree is an opportunity to, one, cultivate relationships, and two, to learn the processes of corporate America and how corporate America works. What are the systems that are in place within corporate America? How do they evaluate people? How do they train their people? What does the daily schedule look like? What are the subsections? We have all the S shops within the Army and services. What does that look like? How do the functions break down from HR to operations to acquisitions to the logistics folks, and how does that process all break down? And then what and where can I affect those processes within a company? And then learning that process, being in a leadership position within the civilian sector, and then eventually starting some entrepreneurial efforts of my own. That's kind of where we're going with that.
I think so. When I think about education, and just let me know if you agree with me, right? I waited like most Rangers until, 30 seconds out from the drop zone, which is retirement, to start doing my schoolwork. I kind of went with the mind of, I'm going to get the fastest degree I can get to get my undergrad, just so I could get the piece of paper, because I knew the piece of paper alone was going to help me open doors. I think sometimes things happen for a reason. The University of Charleston organizational leadership thing was a godsend for me. It helped me translate 20 years of military experience and leadership into civilian speak. And that's what I think civilian education does for somebody like you or me or anybody that's spent more than, that's get staff sergeant 4 to 6 years or above, right? It helps you translate what you've done. Because I didn't know until I did I'm an HR guy. Like, my whole life has been HR for the last 15 years. HR to me was always just about pay and leave. That's really all I cared about HR. Yep. It's a little bit more broad than that in the corporate world. And now I know that, and now I can speak it. So the education, undergrad, any education, MBA, what it will do is it'll weaponize you. It'll make you the weapon. If you get in the room now, we'll own a room when we get in. I guarantee you, I can take anybody anywhere they want to go, because I've been doing it. You've been doing it. The problem is I didn't know how to translate all the leadership. I didn't know that what I did as an infantryman, which has a bad connotation, which is completely wrong, where that value was. Now I know where the value is because of the education. And I often use the reference of it's like doing a live fire. Like, I know if you get me in the door, it's over for them. But it took a support by fire. It took an intermediate support by fire. It took somebody suppressing from here. It took a breacher to put the breach on the door. It takes processes to get you in the door, but once you're in, you'll own it. That's what the education has done for me.
That's right. What is the process, right? Yeah. And the other thing, again, not to go kind of continue to go back to this, but through that leadership and organizational leadership program, the emotional intelligence and empathy was yet again addressed, and it was identified, codified, like we talked about with the mentorship. And again, the mentorship process, as we continue down that road through University of Charleston, it codified and defined mentorship. It defined empathy and emotional intelligence, and continued to build our understanding. So as we get out to the civilian sector, we're looking at all the problems that, the strengths and weaknesses you may face in the civilian sector when it comes to emotional intelligence and empathy. as well. And when you look at that, you go, we kind of grew up in this. I came from predominantly Caucasian town in Wisconsin. And there wasn't much cultural diversity. When I got to the regiment and came down south, that was kind of my first taste of cultural diversity. And in the regiment, it's like a meritocracy, as Colonel Tegmeyer always said. Was a great way to frame it. Nobody really cares who you are, what color your skin is, where you come from, what your background is, what your religious beliefs are. They don't care about any of that as long as you can perform your job. Yep. You have the same values and morals, and you're there to perform your job, and you're all going towards that same goal. Nobody cares. Yep. Man, woman, background, no one cares. It's just a group of people that come together for a common goal. Yeah. And everyone is focused intensely on achieving that goal.
Absolutely.
And so for us, again, I didn't grow up in an environment, both in my personal life outside of the military and in my military life, where we had to deal with many obstacles when it came to race, color, creed, religion, any of those things. And you see the social issues going on in America today, and you realize that those are some of the things that are going to be addressed as we come out of this process of exiting the military and going into the civilian sector, where that stuff's going to be brought to the forefront, and you're going to have to work through some of those situations that we may not have had to deal with. Whether that's a complaint, a sexual harassment complaint, or an equal opportunity complaint in that realm. And those will be things that we'll have to work through in the future as we move forward, things that we may not have gone through or understood in the past.
Absolutely. And we're not sponsored by the University of Charleston here at the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. We're just, an alum and a future alum, speaking.
That's right.
I'm pretty sure any organizational path in any university probably very similar. So
and to get on the point of how I even came across this, right? So I walk into the office, Yuma's working behind his computer over in the regimental headquarters one day, and what do you got up there? And University of Charleston. I'm like, what's that? Tell me about it. And he goes down, and I'm like, how far are you out, from getting your degree? And he tells me. I'm like, who did you go through to get into the college? And he sends me and then fast forward 8-9 months, and I'm down the same degree pipeline in the same classes. I just got my degree completed in time so I could submit my application for Emory, which is kind of that benchmark. So I didn't know, starting when I got to regiment, I didn't know how I was going to get to the process of achieving Emory, but I knew I wanted to get into Emory and their MBA program and complete that. And then just setting that goal and putting my energy in that direction, I stumbled across what was a path, which became a phenomenal path. Yeah. And again, we're not here repping UC Charleston, but it was a eye-opening experience, and it was a very developmental experience and great preparation to go on to that MBA program at Emory.
And I think it goes to show there, like, you came in, you saw me doing it, you asked a question.
Mentorship.
And then you completed before me, even though I started in front of you. So it's kind of like our career has been. It's leapfrogged back and forth.
It has.
But it also, it creates a competition mindset. So there's a lot of senior NCOs now in college getting degrees because they don't want to be the guy that doesn't have it now, right? Well, that's just the nature of the beast, the way we are, the way we're, and that's why we are where we are. So I think we've had a good run, you and I.
Absolutely,
I enjoyed it. I can't wait to see the years to come. Watch your kids grow up, and we'll all the time we'll spend together. But I appreciate you coming on here today. Being open, being vulnerable, taking the armor off a little bit, talking about some uncomfortable things. But I think it's important. I think it helps people when they hear people of the same cloth, of the same values, say things, and then it goes, well, I didn't know he went through that or she did that, and it helps him get through something as well. So that's what it's all about in my mind. We're all people. I just want to make better people, right? Have better people in the world. And hopefully if anybody needs help ever, they ask for the help. And it's through conversations like this that stuff happens. So appreciate you coming on, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
It's been fun, and we'll definitely do this again.
Absolutely.